Welcome to a new episode on the Technomora channel. We really hope you will enjoy watching it and invite you to tell us what you think of it by leaving your reactions below the video. And now, please allow me to present your host, Technomora.
Well, welcome to a new episode on the Technomora channel. And today, the Sony ST-70 tuner complement to the TA-70. Yes, this is the tuner that was actually built to be used with the TA-70 amplifier from Sony. And, well, as the front tells you clearly, this is the ST-70 tuner. I don't know much about it, except that it looks okay to me, visually I mean. There are the usual scratches. There's a little ding here that I will need to look at, and maybe I might be able to restore this a little bit so that it's not as visible anymore as it is now. It's not too overly dirty on the outside. The tuning mechanism, well, yeah, it works. I mean, mechanically it works. I don't know if it works electronically. But, like I said, the seller of the tuner didn't tell me or didn't precisely indicate what was wrong with it, if anything. So yes, the state is unknown. So the back is okay. Yeah, nothing special there. The one thing that doesn't seem to be factory to me is the AC cord. Again, it is fitted with that extremely ugly British AC plug. Very rugged and very safe, but incredibly ugly. And also a wire which could be technically used for a washing machine. I should probably mention that, unfortunately, after having looked fruitlessly, by the way, on the internet for a schematic of the ST-70 tuner, you know, if there's anything wrong with the tuner, since I have no schematic, and I found none on either on paying sites or for free on the internet, I guess I'll have to wing it somehow, and if there's something broken inside of the tuner, I will have to use my knowledge of other radios in order to repair it. Alright, I pulled the knobs off by gently but firmly gripping the knob with my fingers and applying gentle but steady force, and it gradually slid off the shaft on which it was mounted, and it's a typical knurled brass shaft. You can see it down there. Alright, so, and the button is knurled on the inside as well to fit over the shaft. The on-off button is the typical lever knob, which fits on a small metal lever and which was pressed on, and same thing, I used gentle force steady pulling to pull it loose. And there it is. Alright? This is really a typical Sony power button. Alright, so the buttons are released, the screws are released, so now we can slide out the chassis from the cabinet. Alright, so I placed the tuner on its back end on a piece of foam, alright, so as not to damage anything. And I'm going to grab the cabinet and pull it up in the middle and upwards gently. Yeah, so, and the button, the on-off button, is in the on position. Alright, so here we go. Yeah, that is okay. It seems to move, but okay, there we go. It released. Alright. Okay. So there is a first view of the underside of the tuner. Here's the tuning mechanism. And it's relatively smooth. I don't feel any problems turning it. The tuning or the dial cord seems fine. Yeah, no fraying or anything, which is a relief. Because if there's one thing I hate doing, that's rewiring a radio. Now, yeah, the rest of the tuner looks pretty clean. Yeah, you have the AM antenna here, the ferrite antenna. You have the power supply board over there. So this is a power supply board. Obviously you have the switches here, the meter, the field strength meter, and I also see a light bulb for the dial right down there, which probably will need some revision as well. Alright, okay, so that's the light bulb for the field strength meter or the signal strength. And then we have 1, 2, 3 light bulbs for the dial face. Alright. There's also a stereo indicator. I don't see a separate light for the stereo indicator though. So maybe that bulb is not for the dial itself, but it's a stereo indicator bulb. Okay. Well, everything else seems pretty much factory. I don't see, except for the 220 cable that was replaced. Let me see. It was, yeah, the 220 cable here was properly attached to the on-off switch. So okay, maybe it is factory, but it's darn ugly. I'm going to replace that. Alright, let's check the first of the fuses. And that fuse down there, according to the legend above it, is rated at 100 milliamps. Alright? And it measures out at 13 ohms. But remember, I'm measuring it in circuit. Okay, so I'm probably measuring a little bit of resistance of something else as well. Okay, so let's move on to this one here. I don't know if you guys can see it. Can you see it? Oh yeah, you can see it. Okay. Alright. So let's measure it. There you go. Okay, let's see what this will measure. Come on. Come on. There you go. About the same thing. 13.9 ohms. Okay, the next one. Same thing, 13. And the last one. Less than an ohm. Alright. The upper two, so this one and that one, is rated at 100 milliamps. That one, though, is rated at 1 amps, as the legend says right down there. Alright? That's a 1 amp fuse. Okay, so all the fuses check out. Next, let's measure the switch, the power switch, and everything that is hooked up behind it. So in essence, basically the transformer. Okay, so let's see if the switch works or not. So let's flick it in the on position. There we go. Oh yeah, that seems to work. Let's flick it in the off. Okay, in the on. Okay, so the switch seems to work just fine as well. So there's every chance that the tuner will work, but what I'm going to do next actually is replace all the electrolytics. And I'm going to start with the electrolytics on the power supply. So this little PCB here. 9 electrolytics replaced on the power supply board. Now we move on to the tuner board. There you go. 17 capacitors replaced on the tuner board itself. So we can now move on to the next part of the tuner. The dial face of the tuner of the Sony ST-70 is illuminated by, I would say, classic filament bulbs like this one. The light bulb you see here was mounted with a grommet-like mount like this, okay? And okay, the socket you see inside the grommet is something that I'm trying out, okay? As you can tell, the original light bulb has no need for a socket because the wires are attached directly to it. And it seems to be something factory. Yeah? But as you can tell, one of the wires broke off. And since, as I told you at the beginning of the video, I do not have a schematic or service manual, I need to find out first if the power going to the light bulbs is DC or AC. And then next I'm going to decide whether I'm going to replace the light bulbs by a LED replacement, something, a light bulb like this or so. I'm not sure yet. Or whether I will fix something myself, based on an LED. And then in that case I would use probably something like, let me show you, something like this. Alright, so this is an LED panel mount holder, right? So normally this is mounted into a panel, but I could insert it into the original grommet you see here. Instead of a, let's say, a classic E10 style socket, right? I could mount inside of that grommet this kind of holder, which is specifically built to mount a 5 millimeter diameter LED. Okay, so yeah, I need to find out how to go about that. Now the sockets, as you can tell, are mounted to the front panel of the tuner, but so with those rubber grommets, but there's this kind of a, I would say, kind of a glue holding the grommet in, and although it's not rock hard, it is pretty tough to break open. And you can do that basically by pressing gently on the rubber and rupturing the glue. You see? You see it there? So if you do that all around and then you gently rock the grommet back and forth, you can actually extract it without damaging the tuner's front case. It turns out that working on the light bulbs inside the display is a lot easier if you unmount the dial face. And unmounting the dial face is as easy as releasing two screws, one here, one there, and two, I don't know how you call those in English, I would say press fits, maybe? Little buttons like this, that are press fitted into the chassis of the radio. Either way, you only need to release those two press fits and those two screws, and then by gently dropping the display underneath the needle, okay, and then rotating it up and then lifting it out, you can take it out without damaging anything. Remember, this needle is in the way, okay? So if you're not gentle about it, you will damage the needle, okay? And once that is done, it's just a matter of gently rocking back and forth the rubber grommets that you see over there, yeah, until they release. And that's it. And then, you know, I cut away the old light bulbs. And there are four, in fact. There's one behind the signal strength meter as well. Alright, now there's one more little bulb, classical bulb here, but I think I'm going to leave that one in for now. But I will need now to change the original filament bulbs you see there. Alright, so yeah, and I'm already trying out a few combinations. So on the left you see one of those grommets with a E10 brass filament bulb socket, and on the other you see a 5mm LED panel mount socket in this one here. I can't really decide yet what I'm going to do. So I lined up four candidates for lighting the tuning dial of the Sony. And from left to right you have a warm white LED, high power LED, which usually are mounted inside LED spotlights. You have a blue LED with an E10 socket. You have a warm white E10 LED light bulb, so with an E10 socket. So these two in fact would fit without problem inside of this one. And then you have a quote-unquote normal 5mm blue LED inside the little panel mount socket I showed you before. So yeah, well, let me show you a few, and maybe together we can sort of, well, form an idea about which one to use. I'm measuring the output of the transformer for the voltage for the lighting of the tuner, and it turns out to be close to 4.5 volts AC volts. Alright, now I'm using a 1N4007 temporarily to rectify the AC necessary to light an LED. And first in line is the blue LED in the panel mount socket. Okay, so it looks very bright, but really it's bright, but not extremely so. But this certainly looks like a possible candidate for the panel lighting. Alright, this is the blue LED in the E10 socket. And this is the warm white E10 socket LED. It's marginally brighter and slightly more omnidirectional than the blue LEDs, you know, the one there and the other one here. These are pretty directional, meaning that they give a very bright spot in the center and very quickly it weakens off at the borders. Yeah? Whereas this one is much more spread and not so directional. And like I said, it's marginally brighter. Alright, this is the high power LED, so beware for your eyes, it's really strong. Okay, so this LED, well, this is truly high power. Okay, yeah, you know, there's no denying this one is extremely bright. Yeah. Now, do we want that? Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we would actually want such a bright LED. Alright, I was curious whether, as I suspected, inside those E10 LED light bulbs, there was a dropper resistor or not, and I sacrificed one of the warm white LEDs that I have. I mean, I cut it apart and I just am left with the socket, and inside the socket you can actually see a resistor. So now let's measure the resistor. Hang on, because I have to do this with one hand. So, hang on. I wish I had 3 hands. Okay, so there you are. So, if I touch the socket now, watch the meter. .380 ohms. Alright, so there is a dropper resistor indeed mounted inside the socket. And I don't know if you can see it because it's really tiny, but it's right down there. But it's very hard to show. But yeah, there. I think you can just about see it in the top of the resistor in the camera, right? In the image, I mean. So yeah, there's a 380 ohms resistor inside this socket, which is kind of unfortunate. I mean, I suppose I could take it out and place an LED of my own choice inside of it, or a smaller dropper resistor to make it brighter. But I mean, that kind of defeats buying these, right? Yes, I know, you will probably say, oh what, he changed his mind again? And yes, I did. Actually, for a couple of reasons. First of all, maybe someday this tuner will land in someone's lap, and they might have to replace the LED bulb or the lighting in general in this radio. And I thought, you know, why make their lives an absolute misery? So I thought, well, okay, let's just go for a classic screw-in bulb. Second of all, I kind of like the color blue, and since I have a whole bunch of blue LED E10 light bulbs, I thought, well, you know, let's go for that. And this is how I solved the lack of brightness, really. I had a sort of an epiphany, and I thought, well, you know, to increase the brightness, what I actually did was to insert a small 47 microfarad 50 volts capacitor. to the socket's contacts, and that pumped up the voltage by roughly 750 millivolts. Okay, and that was just enough to turn the brightness of the LED to such a level that it's actually useful. Once the socket is inside the grommet, even if only part ways, the hardest part of the job is done. So you wiggle it back and forth like I'm doing, and you actually hear the socket slide inside the plastic holder, or the grommet if you like, and you push it deep enough like that so that the socket sticks out, well, almost sticks out, you see, like that. Alright, so that's how you do it. It takes a little bit of handiness to push the socket in, but yeah, the opening is built, one would say, you'd almost think it was built for it. And in fact, I actually suspect that originally there were to be sockets installed inside the tuner, but for some reason they didn't. And I think they didn't because they wanted to cut some corners and make it, make it a slightly cheaper. Alright, so in fact, in my opinion, what I'm doing right now is doing what it should always have been, namely a socket and a light bulb. So if you're curious to know how the setup would work with regular filament light bulbs, I mean, this is a 6 volts 2.4 watt light bulb, okay, a regular filament light bulb. Have a look at this. Alright, so that's the difference between the LEDs and a regular filament light bulb. Alright, I temporarily mounted back the dial face without screwing it down, so we only want to try it first. Oh, and by the way, before I continue, if you want to unmount and mount the dial face, always roll the pointer, the dial pointer, to the extreme right, okay? Because if you don't and you leave it somewhere here, yeah, you will seriously bend it if you want to release the dial face, okay? So always roll it to the extreme right. finished cleaning the underside of the PCBs, and this is the power supply PCB, and this is the actual tuner board, yeah, or the tuner PCB if you like. And if you wonder how I cleaned it, well, I used a hard bristle brush like this, which is, if I do believe correctly, is pork hair, which is reasonably stiff and hard, and it's basically a flat brush, not too very wide, and some methylic alcohol, yeah, or I think the common name is methanol, and I just took my time and used enough of the alcohol, to denatured alcohol, to clean off all the residues, all the solder residues and everything. And by the way, if you ever wondered why old equipment often has that sickly sweet smell, especially when it's running and hot, well, that is to do with a combination of factors. First of all, it comes from household grease, and back in the day people smoked a lot more than we did, or we do, so a lot of the smell is also the nicotine and the tar of the cigarettes, and grease from cooking and stuff like that, and of course all the plastics inside of the device, which give off those smells. Now, unfortunately, there's not much we can do about the smells plastics release in the air, but what we can do is clean off all the grease and nicotine and dirt off of the PCBs. Alright, so I released the front panel of the tuner simply by unclipping these upper clips here from the inside of the cabinet. Alright, so, and then using my fingernail, I just pulled these clips down one by one and gave them a little push at the same time, but be careful, do use gentle force, alright, because if you're too brutal, you will crack the plastic. Well, there's the setup. I clamped the whole case, or the whole cabinet rather, with a large clamp and some wooden blocks, and I'm applying gentle pressure on the dent, of the tuner. It's firm, it's firmly attached, but I'm applying not too much pressure, but still a bit, in the hope that I can relieve some of the dent out of the case. I finished releasing the clamp, and the front now is slightly better. Yeah, you can still feel the dent a little bit when you rub your thumb over it, but it's all in all, it's not too bad. I mean, probably I could never get it entirely good again, but it's slightly better, yeah. Now what I'm going to do is to clamp it from above and below now, like this, and then see if I can reshape the edge a little bit to be straighter, at least this edge here. And once that is done, then I think, well, there's not much more that I can do to improve it. And this is the final result of all my clamping and heating it up with, not with a heat gun, because I figured that would be too hot. So I just used a hair dryer, yeah, and I warmed it up slightly, and then I used a rag, something like this, yeah, to gently press on the PVC while I was blowing it with the hair dryer, yeah, and although the clamping and the heating up with the hair dryer helped, it didn't remove completely the ding which was in the cabinet, but I believe it is better. Here are the tuner and the amplifier reunited for a final test, alright? And you'll remember from a previous video, this is the TA-70 amplifier that I restored. And yeah, and I reunited it with the ST-70 tuner, which you see here, alright? And remember the ugly AC cable that was connected to the tuner? Well, I replaced it with a very short US style plug cable, like this, alright? And you remember that the TA-70 amplifier has two directly throughputs of AC power. So we have two outlets here, AC power outlets, to which you can connect a device like the tuner, for example. Now, that's nice, right? Okay, no more hassle with cables and such. So, what I'm going to do now is give the amplifier and the tuner a little test drive. So everything is selected correctly. Front speakers, tuner is selected. The mode is stereo. The loudness is on. All the settings are correct here. So let's go. Amplifier, FM, stereo, and AFC is off. Yeah, there's no external antenna connected to the tuner. So I'm just going to quickly scan the band. Okay, let's try the AM.
The confidence to talk about things that I've sort of been too afraid to talk about. One of them is mental health. I suffer from anxiety and I'm not afraid to talk about that. I have Crohn's disease. I'm not afraid to talk about that anymore. It actually is a huge part of my...
Remember, by day AM is really, AM reception is really, really bad where I live. By day, it's only by night that you can actually have, well, decent AM reception. Oh, look at that, a Hungarian radio station. Nice. Well, there you go. So, my kind viewers, there you are. A fully refurbished, cleaned, and repaired tuner, a Sony ST-70 tuner. And I wouldn't say it's a looker, but it certainly is a lot better than what it used to be. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I'll see you back for another episode on my channel. Thanks for watching.